Today, I'm going to answer the question everybody seems to be asking: Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders? Who's a better fit for the Browns? I'll tell you next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, and proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. The Browns are in the mix for Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward with the number 2 overall pick, but only one really fits Kevin Stefanski's offense. Meanwhile, landing Kirk Cousins as a veteran quarterback option may have gotten a little more complicated, but I think it's going to still work out. And what the first few OCK interviews tell us about the play calling looks like for the Browns in 2025. As always, I want to thank you for being an everydayer and making the Locked On Browns podcast your first listen every day. Of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. This episode of the Locked On Browns podcast is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play just $5. Let's get after it, and it is the topic that is sweeping the nation. Not really the nation, sweeping across all of Cleveland and Northeast Ohio, though, and it's all centered around the quarterback position. We know the Browns need one. We know they'll have an opportunity with the number 2 overall pick to at least try to get one of the top 2 guys in this class, which, as has been talked about time and time again, are Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. Those 2 guys supposed to headline this class that, in some respects, isn't really considered a great class of quarterbacks for what it's worth, but maybe the Browns fall in love with one of them or both of them and feel like there's an opportunity there. Now, what I think is interesting, though, is that of the 2 guys, there is one that makes a lot of sense and one that I think is just kind of repeating of the same mistakes, if you will. Maybe not repeating the same mistakes. That's not fair to a young player who hasn't even had a chance to play in the NFL yet. But that could turn out to be that exact thing and not really learning from what the deal and the thing that you just made, the mistake you just made in training for Deshaun Watson. If you aren't picking up what I'm putting down, I do think Shedeur Sanders is the better fit of the 2 for Kevin Stefanski's offense and what the Browns want to do. Everything about him from a scouting standpoint says he's got pinpoint great accuracy. He knows how to navigate the pocket. He knows how to read defenses and go through his progressions and make the throws that are necessary within a structured offense, while also having that added ability to improvise if needed, because he is an athletic player that can buy some time with his legs, and even out of that structure, still able to kind of look downfield and survey and make the throws necessary. That, to me, screams Kevin Stefanski's offense. There's structure. There's, scheming things open in the intermediate parts of the field, while also trying to take some deep shots in the play action. I had read at one point that within Colorado's offense this past year, Shedeur Sanders ran about 28% of his plays were play action plays. So he's got some decent numbers there in terms of or some solid numbers there in terms of being able to run that style of offense and use play action to his advantage. And that's a huge part of Stefanski's system, which is that play action style under center and being able to run sort of the outside zone type plays that made the Browns successful those 2 years where they made the playoffs under Kevin Stefanski, obviously. So all those things just add up to me. And as I've watched some more of his tape over the last week or so, and as I've read more about the scouting reports on him, again, and that's to this point, things could change, and Cam Ward could emerge with some different aspects of his game, or show some things at the combine, or throughout his pro day or whatever, that he is capable of doing some of these other things. But I as things stand right now, Shedeur seems like the better fit. He seems like the guy that is going to better execute this offense more so than Cam Ward. And in relation to Cam Ward, I think what's interesting is there was one scouting report I was reading on how one of the comps for him is Deshaun Watson at his peak. And that stood out to me for obvious reasons. You hear the name Deshaun Watson. I think it's triggering for anybody, fans, media, whatever. But I also do think like you tried that, right? Like I've had questions about the marriage between Kevin Stefanski and Deshaun Watson from the beginning of this trade being made, and whether or not it was the right fit and the right system for him to be playing in. And as this kind of bared itself out, it wasn't. It hasn't been. Now, maybe they could try to make it work with him. It does look like everything points to them going back to that Kevin Stefanski system and doing what was working. Maybe they just kind of say, if Deshaun's at all part of our plans, he would have to sort of fit into this thing. But again, I think he's played his last snap for the Browns. I think this injury setback is going to give them an easy opportunity to sort of put him on the IR for next season, not really think about it, and pivot to other options, whether that's a veteran, whether that's a rookie. But I do think in seeing that comp, it's not just that comp that's kind of made me a little bit hesitant on Cam Ward, because I do think there's a lot of raw talent there that somebody can channel into something at the NFL level. I just don't know if the Browns are the team to do that. And I don't know that like getting a player that is of that same sort of build or prototype as Deshaun Watson is what the Browns need to do right now. They need to find somebody who can play Kevin Stefanski's system and run it effectively. And I just don't think that's Cam Ward. There's too much rawness in his game right now. There's too much risk taking, and there's too much improvising for my liking. If you're trying to get this offense righted and find the quarterback that is the best fit for doing what they want to do on offense in Stefanski's, again, system. So I just don't know that Cam Ward is it. And so that creates this interesting situation, having the number 2 pick, because you have a team in front of you picking. And I also think while Shedeur fits what the Browns want to do, I also think he fits what Brian Callahan wants to do in Tennessee, assuming that they're going to be looking and drafting a quarterback. Because again, it's the shorter throws, it's the intermediate stuff. A lot of what he did with Joe Burrow, if you go back and watch, like a lot of Joe Burrow's throws are within 0 to 9 yards and getting guys to go make plays. Now he runs a lot less play action, but I still think that Shedeur showing he can do that in college would be a reason why he still fits, or he fits the Browns offense while he could also fit Brian Callahan's offense. But I digress on that. Off on a tangent about the Titans now. This is the Browns, the Locked On Browns podcast. But regardless, like I do think there's some interesting scenarios here, because if the Titans end up falling in love with Shedeur and that's their guy and they take him, then you're in a weird spot because it's Cam Ward. I know people were high on Drew Aller after watching the game against Notre Dame tonight. I don't know if he is the option that we think he is. I think he honestly needs that year back in college. And I also don't think he's flipping anyway. So if it's between Shedeur and Cam, like you kind of have a decision to make once you get to 2. And if there's a team that really likes Cam and maybe wants to trade up for him, then yeah, I think you're in that spot where, as I said earlier this week, where the Browns probably trade back, get a couple different picks, are able to add multiple players rather than just one player in the first round potentially. And no one's really the wiser for it. You just try to bolster the roster elsewhere and build around some other quarterbacks that you might have picked up in free agency or traded for or whatever. And I think that's a fine plan if you're just trying to sort of make next year about getting back to the playoffs. But so that's where it kind of comes into play. So a lot is going to rest on what the Browns can do in terms of what the Browns can do at quarterback, what the Titans are doing in front of you, and whether or not they fall in love with the other guy. If they fall in love with Cam Ward and Shedeur's off the board, then I guess they'd still take him. And we talked about that pressure that comes with trying to find that quarterback, and this regime hasn't done that yet. So maybe they're sort of forced into a hole or a corner here where they're like, man, we got to take this guy. I just don't think that's wise to do that. So to me, it's Shedeur or nobody in terms of like the top talent guys on this in this class. And the other part of this too is, does Shedeur want to come to the Browns? Because the biggest fear I have in drafting Shedeur Sanders, not that I think he's going to be like a locker room cancer in the NFL. There's a difference. But I do think like his, Coach Prime, Deion Sanders has talked so much about getting his kids, and he says that with Travis Hunter as well, to places where they can be successful and, with regimes that are going to sort of use them the right way and all that. And that's notable because like we know in Cleveland, there tends to be a lot of turmoil at times and things don't always go right. The second things go wrong, the last thing you need is a quarterback who, and with potentially his dad being as high profile as he is, raising concerns and trying to force his way out of there. And so that's maybe the biggest thing that maybe behooves you from taking somebody like Shedeur Sanders. He could even just come out and say he doesn't want to play for the Browns, and that kind of makes it a moot point anyway. And then the Browns really have to think about what they're going to do if they don't like Cam Ward. But for me, sitting here today, if all things are equal and there's no ultimatums and I don't want to play here, or I'm worried about what Deion Sanders is going to say if we draft you, or if he's going to try to force you out of here, I think Shedeur Sanders is the quarterback that fits what the Browns want to do offensively, Kevin Stefanski's scheme, all that, the best of anybody in this class. Whether or not they have a chance to draft him, well, that's another story. Speaking of quarterbacks, things might have gotten a little more complicated if the Browns want to pursue one of the veteran options that could be out there this offseason. I will tell you who and why it got a little bit more dicey coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. This message is from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't have to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game. They can match you with a TurboTax expert who can get the work done on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you're missing out on deductions, whether you need one form or 20. TurboTax experts give you the taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress, so you can focus on what really matters to you. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll also have the peace of mind of knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for a stress-free tax experience with the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take the taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live, full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax Guarantee. TurboTax.com/guarantees, TurboTax. It's got you covered this tax season. I can proudly say that I won one of my season-long fantasy championships, but I'll tell you, as I have been, it's been a lot stressful this entire season, just constantly worrying about the injury bugs and if it's going to cost me a game or, one game here or there cost me a chance at the championship, all those different things. That's why I try to take the stress out of fantasy with PrizePicks. With PrizePicks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns. For a shot to win 1,000 times your money, you can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or you want to cash out out quickly, PrizePicks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear why people are loving this platform. Here's a special offer for our Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today. Use code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's PrizePicks. Run your game. So an interesting situation in Atlanta today as Falcons general manager Terry Fontenot addressed the media on Thursday and talked about the Kirk Cousins situation and how things kind of went down and what the future kind of holds for him. And he dropped a very interesting line that you will want to know, given what has been reported and rumored about the Browns' interest in Kirk Cousins, considering his history, obviously, with Kevin Stefanski in Minnesota. And so what he basically said was that, Kirk's handled the situation perfectly and that the team is confident moving forward with him potentially as their backup quarterback. This would throw a wrench in plans for both Kirk Cousins and a team like the Browns that were interested in getting him, because saying that basically makes it seem like they're not going to just give him away willingly and freely, despite the fact that they also kind of, I think Fontenot kind of also owned that they sort of missed on this deal. And now that they've pivoted to Michael Penix so soon and made that draft pick in the first place, that may shouldn't have gotten in the Kirk Cousins business. But the problem here is Kirk Cousins holds a lot of the cards because with his contract, he has a no trade clause and nobody is going to trade to acquire him at the cap figure that he is due next year. So they're going to have to find a way to, I would think that Kirk is going to want to put a little bit of pressure on them to be like, hey, I still think I can play. There's teams that are interested in me and would give me a chance to at least compete for a starting job. So let's figure something out where I can get out of this deal and I can go play somewhere else and make my sort of own decision here. And that's going to end with them cutting him at some point. Like, I understand why you maybe see the headline here, and I don't want to say it's triggering, but it maybe like takes Browns fans, other fan bases that might at least want to explore the Kirk Cousins situation. It might make them kind of do a double take of like, oh, well, what's that mean? Like, can my team still go after him? And I get all that. I just think this still ends the same way we thought it was. I think this ends with them finding some sort of common ground, letting Kirk out of the deal by releasing him, and then he goes and signs somewhere for like the vet minimum, and no one's really the wiser. Everyone's on their merry way, and they just, it's all kumbaya, and Kirk gets what he wants, and the team gets what he wants. What I would chalk this up to is this time of year is always like silly season. It's always smokescreen season. I mean, I remember not so long ago, Andrew Berry sitting there at the podium in Berea and telling everybody that they still believed in Baker Mayfield as their starting quarterback. What happened later that offseason? They got in the Deshaun Watson trade discussions, ended up trading for Deshaun Watson. Later that offseason, they traded Baker Mayfield to the Carolina Panthers. And the rest is history, for better or for worse. So I think like Terry Fontenot, I think here's probably trying to sort of just like smooth things over for now and keep everything. He's not trying to give anything away in terms of like leverage that they might have, or let teams know that like, yeah, we're going to release him at some point and you'll be able to just kind of scoop him up at a minimal cost or minimal price. He's just kind of playing the game that GMs have to play this time of year. So I didn't read into this too much more other than it being like okay, yeah, this is just what GMs say at this time of year. I don't necessarily think it means anything massive in terms of what is going to happen with Kirk Cousins. I think this still ultimately plays out the same way, and that the Browns will still very much be in the mix for Kirk Cousins when it all comes to fruition. And again, the situation's perfect in a lot of different ways because, it's very similar to the Russell Wilson going to Pittsburgh thing. And you have a guy who is playing on the minimum while another team sort of pays him elsewhere because of the lucrative contract that he had signed there. And it was just, there was no trading that deal. So he gets out of it and goes and plays for cheap somewhere else and, gets a playoff appearance out of it. We'll see how far the Steelers go in the playoffs. I actually am going to do some picks kind of to get out of here late in the show. So we'll see who I'm picking this weekend. But yeah, like it's very similar. And the ties to Cousins and Stefanski, to me, it feels too good to pass up. That's the big thing for me, because I understand where some fans are probably feeling like, well, is Kirk Cousins really the answer here? And, is he washed at this point? Coming off the Achilles injury, I thought he actually was playing pretty good football through the early portion of the season, and then he just fell off a cliff and was awful for like 5 games straight, and that's when they made the change to Michael Penix. And so, yeah, like there's legitimate questions there about Kirk Cousins and his ability to still play at a high level, if he still got it. But I think for a minimal price of $1.2 million or whatever the vet minimum is going to be next year, you can take a flyer on Kirk and see if there's anything left in that tank. And it's enough where for that price, you might as well see if there's some, if Kevin Stefanski and his system and his scheme that worked for Kirk in Minnesota, by the way, can sort of pull that magic back out of Kirk Cousins and make him a viable player for you next year. Like there's enough intrigue there that for a little over $1 million, why not give it a whirl? And if it doesn't work out and you realize in training camp that he doesn't have it anymore, you can always move on for, again, it costs you nothing to do it and try. And this is kind of the situation the Browns are in because the Deshaun Watson situation. They got to take some chances. I've talked about it already, but like they got to take some risks. Kirk Cousins probably represents that. Like, I don't know if he's going to be your franchise savior. Maybe he gets to the playoffs next year and can kind of reclaim some old version of himself. And that's maybe what you're looking for, at least for in a 1 year sort of magnifying glass. But yeah, like it's the hand that they've been dealt. It's how they got to kind of navigate this thing. And for the price that you'd get him for, I think it makes a lot of sense. So I don't think Terry Fontenot saying that we're comfortable with him being the backup means that he doesn't end up playing somewhere else this offseason. I think that situation, and Kirk could be the one to make it ugly. He's not really that type of guy, it doesn't seem like. But if he wants out and he wants to sort of explore other opportunities, I would think that the Falcons at some point would just kind of concede and make that happen for him. So we'll see what happens. But as things stand today, I'm not too worried about Terry Fontenot sort of giving you his best poker face and saying, yeah, well, we could hang on to Kirk and just keep him around as a backup. I don't think that's ultimately how that situation is going to play out. But maybe I'll be wrong when it's all said and done. We need to look closely at the OC candidates that are interviewed so far. I think it can be pretty telling as to what the Browns are thinking in terms of their play calling for 2025, or more so what Kevin Stefanski is thinking for the play calling in 2025. I will explain and talk about that with you coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. It's that time of year. That's right. The playoffs have finally arrived. And the NFL playoffs are, frankly, just better with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 off or $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, some same game parlays, and so much more. I am a big anytime touchdown parlay builder in the playoffs. I also sometimes take a little bit more risk and play the first touchdown scorer game bet, or parlay it into a couple of different games in a row to see if I can hit on those and cash with some decent money. But the opportunities are endless. You can build your own parlays, have your own fun. It's the postseason, and nothing's off limits. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, so the Browns have brought in several candidates to interview. One was in-house, so it wasn't really bringing him in. It was just kind of inviting him down to Kevin Stefanski's offense to talk to him. In tight ends coach Tommy Rees. The other two candidates that have interviewed as per reports right now include veteran, former offensive coordinator for the Seahawks and even the Vikings, Darrell Bevell, and current Seahawks quarterback coach Charles London. Now, there's a couple of different things I think to decipher from these candidates and these interviews and who they've brought into this point. And I think the first thing is Kevin Stefanski looking for a thought. I hate that I'm saying this. I am too in tune with the Browns vernacular now. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry always use the phrase thought partner. And that was the phrase I was about to say. He's looking for a thought partner. He's looking for somebody he can bounce ideas off of that shares, I think, a similar philosophy as him, and that it's not this complete pivot to a different offense and a different system and different just terminology and everything that Ken Dorsey kind of represented. So it's back to the basics. It's again, what I said at the top of the show and talking about why I think Shedeur Sanders is a better fit. It's getting back to Kevin Stefanski's system and people that can help run it and are going to sort of be like-minded thinking in the way that they want to do this thing offensively, rather than just going and saying, let's get somebody in here who can make our quarterback great. No, they're pivoting back to what they do best, which I think is a key proponent of this offseason and what's kind of the driving force behind everything the Browns are doing right now. And what we've seen so far in these searches and these candidates. I mean, Mike Bloomgren, as I mentioned, coming in as the new offensive line coach, that felt like a move that was, again, guy from the Bill Callahan tree. People perk up when they hear that because they know what Bill Callahan represented to this organization. And that guy was the best in the business. And I heard again that he kind of came recommended as well from Bill Callahan himself. So again, they're getting back to the things that made them successful. And so Kevin Stefanski, it feels like, is looking for somebody who can share the offensive sort of thought process together, and that is like-minded in his thinking, which I do think is kind of key in these organizations today, whether it's between a coach and a GM being on the same page, a coach that's an offensive-minded coach with a coordinator, vice versa, defense with the defensive coach, defensive coordinator with a defensive-minded coach. All those things matter. So, yeah, like they're all trying to get aligned here, and I think that's good. Now, the other thing I think that's interesting that I feel is telling is that you have Tommy Rees, you have Charles London. Those two guys have never called plays at the NFL level. Rees has done it in the college ranks. Obviously, Charles London, coming from his most recent stint, he is the quarterbacks coach for the Seahawks. And it's been a lot of position sort of group coaching roles for him. Now, Darrell Bevell does have the coaching, the offensive coordinator experience. He's done that throughout different portions of his career. He was the OC for the Vikings, starting with the Vikings from 06 to 2010. Then he was the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks from 2011 to 2017. Then he also did it with the Lions in 2019 to 2020. And then the Jaguars in 2021 very briefly. And right now, he's the Miami Dolphins quarterback coach and passing game coordinator. Now, the Viking years of his resume are important because he worked with Kevin Stefanski in Minnesota. Again, his first year being 2006, where he was an offensive coordinator. Kevin Stefanski started with the Vikings in 2006 as an assistant to the head coach and then accelerated up to assistant quarterback coach, tight end coach. And this was, at this point, Bevell was already out of the organization because he left in 2010. But he was the assistant quarterback coach at his highest position under Bevell before he continued his path up to eventually being the quarterback's coach, the interim OC, the eventual OC for the Vikings, and now obviously the coach of the Browns. So that, again, as you talk about a thought partner and a like-minded thinker, clearly it's somebody that Kevin Stefanski has a history with, has certainly built his offense, I would imagine, sort of around and with some inspiration from. And this gives him an opportunity to maybe reunite with somebody that he's crossed paths with throughout his career and that he obviously admires on some level. And so I find that interesting because all of this feels interesting to me because it all points to me, to Kevin Stefanski going back to being the primary play caller, which is probably the way that it should be, at least in my opinion. Maybe you feel differently, but Kevin, from all accounts, has the respect of that locker room as a play caller. And the players actually think that he should be the one doing that. And so understanding that and knowing that, being around the team every day, it feels right that he does take that back. Now, Bevell's the one that's interesting because maybe he would trust somebody like Bevell to run the offense in his place. But it just feels to me like he's bringing somebody in to sort of be that springboard, work with closely, have this, be on the same page with things, but then still be the guy calling the plays on Sunday. The fact that he's doing this with guys who either haven't ever done that before or people he's worked with before who have done it, but that haven't held an OC job in several years now, it points to me like Kevin's going to take that role back, and he wants somebody there that can be sort of that supporting actor, that supporting role in making sure the game plan is sound every single week and just lifting him up and giving input where needed on game days to make sure that they're putting themselves in the best possible situations to be successful. But that's me just kind of reading tea leaves here. But to me, these candidates all scream like finding a like-minded thinker, getting back to what we do best, finding that identity again that we lost this year, and so many players alluded to that. And then on top of that, feels like Kevin Stefanski ultimately being the guy taking the play calling back in 2025, which, like I said, feels like the right move. You hired him to do that. He was brought in here for his offensive prowess and the mind that he is. I just feel he's got to be the guy doing that on game days, even if it takes him away from some other things. I think he's done a fine enough job in his first 4 years, I guess 4.5 years, even though the offense was terrible under Deshaun, but that was more of a Deshaun problem, I think, than anything. He's proven himself enough as a play caller to still maintain that responsibility. And if we have to revisit it at some point, sure we will. But for now, I think that should reside with Kevin Stefanski. And I think these initial rumors and reports of guys who have interviewed for the job, it points to Kevin taking that responsibility back on. That's going to do it for us. For me, I should say, another episode in the books with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. And as we head into a very interesting offseason for the Cleveland Browns. There'll be plenty more ahead in the weeks and months coming. And I hope you continue to make us your first listen every day. For your second listen, go find a new Locked On NFL show. Or if you want to keep it local, you can check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thanks for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I almost forgot. I was going to give you picks to get out of here. My picks for the playoffs this weekend. Ravens over the Steelers, Chargers over the Texans, Bills over the Broncos, Eagles over the Packers, Commanders over the Bucks, and maybe the one that Commanders over the Bucks might feel somewhat of an upset to people. Bucks are at home, but I just think the Commanders are a better team. But the one that I feel like is going to be an upset, Rams over the Vikings, I almost wonder if the Vikings were broken by the Lions and Sam Darnold's kind of been figured out here. I think the Rams could be the team to do it. So there's my picks for you. That's going to do it for me. Thanks again for stopping by. And I will talk to you again real soon. But for now, I'm out.